Before we get into anything, I want to announce that I am now an affiliate with DualSpec. DualSpec is a premium card sleeve, and if you want to pick some up, you can save 10% by using code DUO or the affiliate link in the description. Do you know how I sacrificed my Tawny so you wouldn't have to worry about it again? Absolutely, that was really hard for you. Yeah, Tawny's coming right back. What do you mean? I'm summoning another Tawny. What do you mean? I'm summoning another Tawny after a playsight and I feel terrible about it. But Tawny's gone. What do you mean? She's not gone. So you sacrificed a Tawny? I'm getting one right back. What do you mean? You process however you need to process this. If you want to keep talking Which Tawny you're playing? Both. Are you sacrificing Tawny? I'm sacrificing Tawny. Are you summoning a new one? Yes. How do you do that? I don't have to choose. You have to choose. You can't have both Tawnies. What am I supposed to do? What do you think? You can have a bunch of Tawnies? You get one Tawny. That's the way the realm works. Why? Welcome back, everyone. I know there's been a few videos already talking about this subject. I won't beat the same points to death. I did think that I could provide maybe a unique perspective just with how I adopted Druid so early after release and the success I found with Druid. I thought maybe it would be good to share my maybe opinion or how I think it's going to affect things downstream. It's hard to know for sure, especially with Gothic's release, but I can kind of speak to the changes in the immediate term, how I think Druid itself in a vacuum will function. CJ touched on a lot of the same concerns I had. I do think that these changes, specifically not only to Druid with how Tawny is no longer redundant and recursive, I should say, but with the Grimgris Arm and Mask of Mayhem changes. Firstly, we all know you only get one Tawny now. That's the biggest nerf to Druid, as opposed to the other one, which we'll chat about in a second. Why that's the biggest change is not only do you not get free stuff, but having every site have the potential to be a river of flame was really good, and it was the strongest thing Druid could do. I think with us not being able to summon a spellcaster anywhere we summon our site and remove the threat nearby, I think we'll actually start to see a meta that you can actually stick a threat in an aggressive spot without having to go through a ton of hoops to play the 5 or 6 mana guy. For instance, the whole reason I included Updraft Ridge in my Smoke and Ash list is because I was looking for a card that would let me play my 5 power airborne units or my 5 cost airborne units in a position that my opponents couldn't just immediately play a site, summon a Tawny, and remove it, but also have a vector of attack to get in some value once they do get in range of the hard removal spell. That was the whole thought behind Updraft Ridge. Outside of that, it did have a ton of great use cases. I was always really impressed with that card, but that was the whole point, was to play around people summoning Tawny on their site. So I think now we actually get to play maybe a minion a little more forward, maybe in a more aggressive spot without it immediately being wiped off the board. And that's a good thing. That's a really good thing. It also tones Druid's power level back a little bit, because not being able to do that means now maybe your Druid's going to have to take a step instead of just freely drawing a site and kind of losing that innate card advantage engine that Druid had. I know I spoke about this early on, that Druid just has so many cards all the time because it's never tapping. So you're always getting to draw sites when you're not playing sites. And that adds up over time. I mean, it's essentially a Pathfinder ability. So I wanted to kind of highlight a few games, particularly moments in games that, and just really clearly illustrate what I'm talking about here. So specifically, this is just after my 4th turn against Pete. I know I just posted this video, but it's a really clear illustration of the point I'm making. I just packed with the devil, sacrificed my Tawny, and drew 3 cards. That was my turn. And in new Druid, that would have been my only Tawny. I wouldn't get to summon a Tawny again. I wouldn't get to do anything like that. And that would be a really heavy decision to say, okay, my Druid's front ability is allowing me to pact and not spend my own life for it. And is that worth it? Probably not. But But what it enables in the current form of Druid, before these changes take effect when Gothic's released, is Pete plays his Pond and plays a really great aggressive minion, the Panorama Manticore, typically really hard to deal with, lethal, airborne, 5 power. But with the current working of Druid, I currently have the Disintegrate in hand, and I could take a step forward and disintegrate the Panorama Manticore. That would set me back a mana. That would mean I don't get to play the Beacon in this instance and play the Quarrelsome Kobolds. But because of the way Druid works, playing the Beacon, summoning the Tawny, disintegrating the Panorama Manticore, I get to ramp, I get to remove the threat, I get to play a threat of my own, and I have my own Tawny in play. So those plays, that pressure release valve that Tawny provided, it kind of goes away, and now you can play the Panorama Manticore forward on a pond and actually require some level of taxation from your opponent to deal with it. And that, again, I love a mid-range meta. I think a mid-range beater like Panorama Manticore is a great card, and I'm really excited for cards like that to have a place in the meta. Secondly, I wanted to illustrate another game. It's the other one I posted, ironically, because I think it actually illustrates how Druid is going to be played. Against Tim, he and I are both playing. I'm playing the air fire list in this game. He's playing a mono fire list. And I wanted to highlight, and I'm going to put it on 2 times speed because I want to go through a few turns here. So in my first turn, I play a Sight and I summon my Tawny. He plays a Sight and he moves his Tawny forward. And I had talked about it in this video that I learned pretty early on into this very heavy fire meta, and even with air, that moving your Tawny forward pretty much lost you the Tawny. And I think this is how we're going to see Druid have to be played, where you're just really conservative with your Tawny. You're not moving it at all until you're trying to get value out of it. And if it dies, you just have to deal with it. So your decks just can't be super reliant on Tawny for value. They can't be super reliant on them as a spellcaster for your removal. And that is how I treated my Tawny in most games I played, and was able to do pretty well with it, even with the ability not to do that. So I don't think Druid is dead, is what I'm getting at. I was playing the same kind of play pattern then as I probably will be going forward. So yeah, it will make your opponent prioritize killing your Tawny a little more than they were previously, right? Like if Tim had a Colicky Dragonets that he was considering holding to try to get more value out of. Now, you'll just play the Colicky Dragonets to kill the Tawny and move on with your life. And that's going to feel really bad. Maybe you have to play your Sight sideways now and move the Tawny off your main Sight to avoid those mainline projectiles. But it's those kind of like really small details, the minutia of like, how do I get my value out of these cards, is what I like about this game. And positional aspects of this game is the best aspect of this game. And so cards like Druid in their current form, pre-nerf, removing a lot of the positional concerns, and making those aspects like Disintegrate, the nearby word, was trivial because Tanya's airborne and can be summoned all over the place, and making those cards feel really good when you can remove something nearby, but also taxing to get nearby is a good thing in my opinion. So lastly, I wanted to highlight just kind of like where I think a Druid deck would land before Gothic. I know we're a few days from Gothic, like I said, but I don't think Druid is gone. You know, I wanted to look at like the deck I'm most familiar with is Hot Springs. I played it for forever, and see what I would do if Druid was the way it is now. When I was building the deck, what would I do? What would I include? What would I exclude? And what it boiled down to is a lot of the positional based spells. I had to look at other alternatives, or I had to weigh if those abilities were strong enough that if I didn't have Tawny in play, that I would still want to cast it. With the new iteration, I'm running Pact with the Devil still. I do think by putting more spellcasters like Adept Illusionist and Lady of the Lake back into it, you can justify running it, or you can pack to your Tawny. The 4 mana for 3 cards is still really worth it, especially in like this aggro shell where you're digging to find your broken uniques. So Pact with the Devil is probably still a mainstay in Druid, even though you don't just get your Tawny back for free. But one card that I really wanted to highlight that I think just really just went up in stocks for Druid is Fire Breathing. And especially in the Waterfire iteration, I know I talked about it while I was playing against Pete. It was a card I had to be very conscious about, even when he had a Warhorse in play, as an example, because Fire Breathing being able to be cast from any beasts and the concentration of beasts in the Waterfire package in Druid in Hot Springs made it something you had to be really concerned about. It's not just like Lava Flow that you can cast from Tawny almost exclusively. Now, I know it doesn't kill root spiders, which was a big thing. However, it is a little more easy to cast, even though it is a little worse of a card. And that's where you're just going to have to make the justification for Druid now, because you aren't guaranteed to have the Tawny to get into position to cast the Lava Flow when you need to. So Fire Breathing, I think, is a really, really great card, a really great inclusion. Like I mentioned, Adept Illusionist to have more spellcasters. But other than that, the core deck stayed pretty much the same. We are including 2 Infernal Legion and a Sir Mordred now. This is off the heels of doing a lot of testing for Houston and working with my really good friend Chris Ismark the Lesser on his deck he wanted to take. He really liked the thought of a more top-end big springs deck, a big hot springs deck, and it did really well. He got top 8. He lost against Pete just before I played against Pete, so I could have been playing against him on this list in the semifinals. And the deck is really scary, and it's not just because Tawny, because it's more of a mid-range top-end list. He was hardly using Tawny for those reasons as well. So putting like Sir Mordred in as another hard removal option where you're not just having to leverage Tawny makes total sense now. In our packet, in our artifacts, maybe we take out Trinkets. I want to try it. The card is obviously really, really good. Even before Druid was a thing, the card was run quite a bit. But, you know, when we're incentivized to flip earlier because our Tawny is dead and we don't have any ability, maybe getting 2 Drums of Doom in and then more reliably seeing a Drums of Doom to protect your own sites is worth it. So now we're up to 2 Drums of Doom. Obviously no Mask or no Grimgris Arm. And on the topic of Mask and Grimgris Arm, I think those are like the best changes. I know I use them. I know we pretty much all did because they were too good not to. And I don't like necessarily cards that are too good not to run, like the Ring of Morgan, for instance. I don't like that for a game where every deck gets to or should include Ring of Morgan, Tor's Hammer Trinkets, and Grimgris Arms, Mask of Mayhem, one of the two. I also didn't love what they enabled in the game with the one-shot meta we were in. I do see it was a good and necessary, maybe not good. I do see it was an answer for Archimago and Archimago's rise in popularity, because getting Archimago to 6 health was the same as keeping them at 20 health in a lot of games because they just could heal so much so quickly. So making healing nullified by putting them at death's door quickly and instantly was a solution to it. I think it opened a can of worms where we had other games being less interactive because my opponent stuck a 5-power minion and had Grim Grapple in hand. And they're both not great metas. I still argue that a Druid meta was better than an Archimago meta. Even a Druid Mask of Mayhem Grimgris Arm meta is better than an Archimago meta. However, I am glad to see those cards and that potential lighten up a bit. Like for instance, Grimgris Arm Grapple Shot is still possible. It's just not possible to attack the site for that extra 10 damage. You have to stick the attack on the avatar, which is a little easier to play around now. So that's kind of my 2 cents on like the major changes. I know I didn't touch on everything, but I'd love to kind of like get y'all's feedback on this. If I'm way off base, let me know. I'm going to be playing Druid just to see how it really feels, and I haven't really got to, just been traveling for the holiday. But with Gothic's release, I bet we'll all be way too focused on some of the other avatars to even care about this very much longer. I think I think Persecutor is really exciting, and I think several of the Savior and the wards is something that introduces a whole level of build around. And I know I've talked about previously, I'm a deck building fiend and theater crafting fiend. So if you're going to inject 500 cards into a game, I'm going to be looking at them and how I can include them and combine them with the new cards and with old cards and things. So like I said, Druid's probably going to be old news for me, but I do want to test it in the meantime, in the interim, to see how it does. But wow, subscribe, let me know. Other than that, y'all take care.